Race 3 of the BMW IBSF four-man bobsleigh World Cup. We're in Altenberg in Germany, and for the first day of this race weekend, it is neither raining nor snowing at the moment. That has definitely cursed the weather. Hello everybody, I'm Martin Haven. Final day of action here in Altenberg, down in the depths of Saxony. Alongside me is Anne van Nieuwenhuis, who raced for Belgium in the women's encounter yesterday. And track looking like it's going to be a lot faster today if the weather holds off.
Definitely. It's a bit colder than yesterday. It's more like the weather we had on the last sliding day on training, like Thursday. So it's going to be a little bit faster, and eventually the foreman's going to go faster anyway. You can see this is a very long start record. Is from a long time ago, so it'll be interesting to see if someone can beat that. You go into curve 1, which is a pretty big steer to bring it round. Tricky one to go straight to curve 2. And then you just want to hold your breath, so you go straight through curve 3, going into the big omega curve, a two-wave curve. You want to avoid going in too early or tapping before going into 5, and controlling curve 6 when you go into the labyrinth of curve 7 and 8. Go in left side with pressure into curve 9, into the long straightaway, setting you up for the Kreisel. You want to enter on the left side. It's a 3-wave Kreisel. You want to allow the waves, but not let it get out of hand. Sneak through the 11-12 labyrinth down. You want to go early into curve 13 so it doesn't throw you up. Control it to 14, going uphill to curve 15. And want to have the early entrance in the big curve 16, going straight into curve 17, crossing the finish line, and then you have a little finish curve behind the crossing of the finish line.
Well, the track record set in the World Championships, in fact, the year after the World Championships in 2008, that was the last Worlds here. Next year's World Championships will return to Altenberg. Francesco Friedrich is the World Cup points leader with a pretty decent record so far. Silver and gold in Winterberg. Nico Walter, gold and bronze in Winterberg, and Johannes Lochner took the other 2 medals, a bronze and a silver. So far we've had 2 German clean sweeps of the podium. We'll have to see whether that happens here. Yesterday, Lochner crashed out of the 2-man race, but he does reckon this is his favourite track, so you never know. We could be in for a German 1, 2, 3. Oscars Melbardis has been on the podium for the last couple of seasons in 2-man and 4-man, kept that record alive with bronze yesterday. Behind that man, our winner, Francesco Friedrich. Justin Cripps led after the first heat, and the joint 2-man Olympic champions battled it out for victory. Cripps ending up with a silver medal at the end of it. But Anne, it is pretty cold, and at the moment no rain, which has been really the bugbear for the last couple of days on the track. So hopefully it'll be relatively fast. Justin Olsen of the USA is the first man off. Roman Heinrich basking in the glory of a fabulous 5th place run yesterday goes off second. Cody Bascue, because of injury, sits in the sled, as does Benny Meyer of Austria. We have 20 sleds in the field from 11 different nations. We're looking for a bunch more to join us next week for the European Championships. First sled, round 3 of the BMW IBSF four-man bobsleigh World Cup. Only our second venue after double 4-man duty in Winterberg just before Christmas. As we're in Altenberg in Saxony, Justin Olsen, Kyler Allison, Adrian Adams and Kyle Wilcox kick things off for the USA.
It's the first week for Justin in Altenberg ever, so he's been having to learn the track in just 6 trips, divided between his 2-man and 4-man, so that's a really tough task. And you could see yesterday there were a couple of mistakes down the track, but that's logic if you only have 6 trips of training down the track.
The man on the brakes, Kyle Wilcox, in only his 2nd ever bobsleigh race of any kind.
Little tap going out of 4. And again going out of 6 steps before going into 7. But controls it nicely around 9, but skids it after hitting. Lower line in Kreisel. Taking control, doesn't want to let the sled get out of his hands.
It is a daunting track, isn't it? There's so many places you can make mistakes that cost you time.
And you want to go close to the walls to have the early entrances, but you don't want to actually hit the wall, so it's a fine line.
So across the line, Justin Olsen, speed at the bottom, 127.7 kilometres an hour. Little grimace from his coach there at the bottom. Kyler Allison, the man at 2, only his second ever four-man World Cup start. There he is leaning over driver Justin Olsen. Adrian Adams at 3, he was on the two-man sled yesterday. And Carl Wilcox, as I said, only his second bobsleigh race ever.
Here he comes out of 9, hits the wall, and he starts going into a skid. He wants to correct it and then hits the wall again, pushing him into a skid on the other side. And then comes out of 14, dives a little bit too hard, and then skids again going into 15, and then comes out with a lot of pressure, just hanging on before going into 16.
Pretty happy with that. Boys pushed great.
Boys did push great. Yesterday, Roman Heinrich, a fabulous 5th place. Not sure that France has been in the top half dozen in two-man this century. This is his 3rd start ever in a four-man in World Cup for Roman Heinrich, with Lionel Lefebvre, Dorian Otteville and Jeremy Bouterin behind him. Bouterin on the brakes, 80 kilos, lighter than some of the female athletes and comfortably the lightest brakeman in the field.
5:36, just a little bit off the pace of Justin Olsen, but controls it better around curve 1 and 2.
Well, Anne, after training where it was dry, it was snowy, it rained a little bit. Yesterday and the day before, very slushy, very soft ice. Today, much harder, very different feel. How quickly do you get used to that?
Yeah, it's hard for the guys to make the transition from two-man to four-man is a big difference. And then with different conditions, it's an even bigger difference. I think they're comfortably going 2 seconds faster than they went yesterday. So it takes a lot of adjustment to control this big sled.
1:15.6. That's good speed. A little quicker than Justin Olsen, nearly 72 miles an hour. Down at the bottom, fringing up towards 74 miles an hour. In fact, 80.7 at the line, so 55.35 slide.
Very decent looking run. No big mistakes.
Now, like most drivers, Roman Heinrich took himself off to learn how to drive in a two-man sled, and that's a sports car compared to this big bus of a four-man. So he's got much more experience and feel for a two-man, and learning his way still in this four-man sled.
Coming out of 9 with the pressure, tapping on the right side. And just a little skid going into Kreisel, goes in Kreisel a little late, which makes him wave in the first one, and in the second wave a little bit more than we saw Justin Olsen do.
So Roman Heinrich of France safely down, 14th and 16th so far this season. Cody Bascue didn't do four-man. He was injured in Sigulda, went home for Christmas early, so didn't go to Winterberg. The 24-year-old is joined by 22-year-old Josh Williamson, a lacrosse player in his 4th World Cup. Jamie Reed from Garmisch-Partenkirchen and Hakim Abdul Sabur. Now, as yesterday, Cody Bascue sitting in to protect his injury. Josh Williamson at 2, only his 2nd ever four-man start. His only previous other start was pushing for a Lana Myers-Taylor.
And Hakim did a really great job yesterday, pushing Cody in the two-man. 5:46, that's a really impressive start with just 3 guys, and the pilot already sitting in. Great line coming out of 1.
Now let's see what he can produce here.
Cody had some great runs yesterday and really good speed, so I'm interested to see what he can do today with a four-man.
BMW four-man looks like a big old tank. It's a wide cowl at the top of the sled to get the men in and to give them a comfortable ride. Clearly they've worked in the wind tunnel to make sure that's not a deficiency.
Great coming out of curve 9, but a little bit too much pressure on the end of Kreisel, flopping off. We're controlling it again in the labyrinth, 11-12.
Well, better speed than the French sled. Little tap and another little tap. Less of a drama when you've got all the momentum of a four-man sled. Speed at the bottom, 129.9, exactly the same as French. Just 700ths behind, despite that sit-in. So Cody Bascue there with a good run down the track. Started a 10th behind, finished only 700ths behind.
And that was a great drive. A little bit of a mistake out of curve 14 with too much pressure. That's why he had the hits going uphill and killed a little bit of his momentum that he created throughout the track. Controlling the waves. He's going up high in the 2nd wave and shooting up in the 3rd. And that's why he comes out with a little bit of pressure there, flopping off. dives off curve 9. Avoid stepping the wall, and then just doesn't break into the skid.
Great to see a big crowd out here today, and they're being treated with slightly better weather, to say the least, than the drizzle and the wind of the last couple of days. Roman Heinrich, Cody Bascue, Justin Alston, first 3 down. Heat 1 here in Altenberg. Bronze in the 2-man yesterday. Oscar's Kibermanis finished in bronze in last year's 4-man race, so he's got a good streak of success going here in Altenberg. Kibermanis in his 41st World Cup start. Here's how experienced this crew is compared to Cody's. Kibermanis, 41 World Cup starts. Mattis Miknes at 2, only 26. Arvis Vilkaster, 48 in 4-man alone. And Yannis Strenger, the man on the brakes, this is his 52nd 4-man World Cup start. So he's over 100 World Cup races, likely as not. So they're enormous experience in the crew, and you'll see that from the way they load. They'll just be in like, now this is cursing them obviously to leave a man behind at the start, but I mean, since Kibermanis arrived sort of 6 years ago, this team has basically done every race almost unchanged.
Yeah, but the man on the back has been on Oscar's Melbardi's sled a lot of times, so I'm guessing they put together these guys, and they've not pushed together that often. So it'll be interesting to see if they can have the efficient load they're so well known for.
Total of 167 4-man World Cup races alone in this crew. There you go. Well, they managed not to leave anybody behind. 5:16, 2:10s quicker than anybody else so far. Start record 5:04 dates back to 1996.
And great looking lines at the top of the track. No mistakes so far. Carries the speed and controls it nicely out of curve 9.
And sounds so quiet, and that's always a clue, isn't it, that the slide is going well.
A perfect straightaway going into the Kreisel. Nice waves, controlling it, but not steering too much. Little rattle going into 14.
Fabulous speed, 74 miles an hour going into the Kreisel. Comfortably quicker than anybody off that start, and at the line, 54.40. Okay, we're a long way from the all-time track record, but that might be setting the benchmark for where you need to be to get into the medals. 82.5 miles an hour at the bottom, and still accelerating after the final speed gun.
That was a great looking run. Placed it exactly where he wanted to be.
Well, they look good, and they start well, and Kibermanis driving superbly.
Really good load from the pilot. Just puts his feet forward and goes straight in. And here he comes out of curve 15 with a lot of pressure, flopping off, and then shooting high in curve 16.
Kibermanis, perhaps Justin Kripps are the danger men for an all-German podium. Let's see what Hansi Lochner can do. Crashed out in yesterday's 2-man race. The 4-man world champion and European champion, by the way. That title up for grabs next weekend. The 28-year-old in his 19th 4-man World Cup. He's had 7 wins in a total of 10 podium finishes.
You can see a little bit of shoulder padding on his right shoulder from the crash yesterday. He wants to protect that shoulder. 5:15, even faster than the Latvians. But already in the red, so his exit speed might have been a little bit off compared to the Latvians.
New boy at 3 on the sled, Florian Bauer, the 24-year-old. This is his second 4-man start. He got bronze in his only previous race in Winterberg with Hansi.
Great line coming out of the curve 9, going into Kreisel.
And Lochner's uncle Rudy, who won the 2-man World Championship gold here in 1991, is at the track again this weekend.
A little bit high again in curve 12, but he got it under control this time and brings it out.
Well, 2:10s back on the Latvian again. Late pressure off 14.15. And across the line, quarter of a second back, 54.65. Well, that shows what a good run it was from Oskars Melbardis. Though he's from Koenigsegg, Lochner does say this is his favourite track. Maybe just not treating him quite the way he wants to this weekend. 2 medals so far this season. He is a bit tender getting out of the sled, isn't he?
You can see him going high in curve 11 and going high in curve 12, but he definitely steered it out of curve 12 this time. Going middle early into curve 13 and just shoots it out perfectly, going out of curve 14, early into curve 15. And like a lot of guys, with pressure, coming out and flopping off out of 15.
Guess they're getting through there so much quicker than they did yesterday. It's taking time to renegotiate that. Next up, Yun Jong-won, our Olympic silver medalist in 4-man from Pyeongchang, 9th in yesterday's 2-man race. He was 13th and 9th in Winterberg, so a very mixed bag. But Winterberg, 9th place in the last race before Christmas. That's his best ever 4-man result outside of North America.
He's very experienced in the North American tracks. That's where he learned to drive, so European tracks are not at his best pace yet.
I think 9th in a 2-man yesterday, probably his best 2-man result outside North America as well.
5:31, a little bit slower than the teams we saw before.
Changing up the squad a little, new boy at 3, Kyungmin Lee has only done 5 World Cups.
Nice control in the upper portion of the track. He comes out of 9. Just a little tap, but goes early into Kreisel, just as you wanted to.
1:16.1, he's half a kilometre an hour and more shy of the fastest sled of Oskars Kiebermanis.
And just a little bit of a skid going out of Kreisel and going out of 12.
Speed.
Nothing major, but it kills a little bit of your speed.
Equals the top speed down here at the bottom, but he's losing too much time early on. What's he got at the line? 1:31.3, not bad. 3rd fastest from the Hyundai sled, despite those mistakes.
4.95 the time, and
the Korean's coached now by Rico Peter.
And I think he's happy with that.
Yeah. Well, as you say, you know, all the Koreans, because of their proximity, particularly to the west coast of the US, have basically started in Whistler and then learned the North American tracks. So predominantly they're like US and Canadian athletes. That's what they know best.
Very nice load of the guys, getting their arms in at the same time.
Loving little gold highlights, the gold handle sticking out there as on. Technically, probably should be silver, but yeah, we'll let it go. Oskars Kiebermanis leads from Hansi Lochner and Yun Jong-won. 5 down, 15 to go in the first heat of the 4-man. Austria's Markus Treichel at the line now. He is the 7th of our sleds in 20-strong field here in Altenberg, Germany. Martin Haven and Belgian driver Anne van Nieuwenhuis watching the action with you. The 25-year-old Austrian, 10th in both races in Winterberg. 28-year-old powerlifter Markus Gluck. 25-year-old new boy Sebastian Mitterer, his 4-man debut was in Winterberg. And 21-year-old Christian Huber, also a debutant in Winterberg. Huber, the man on the brakes, after 2 4-man races in Winterberg, has now a total of 2 4-man races in his life. So,
very experienced crew, just like the Latvians.
And he's never even started a 2-man race. So this is race number 3.
Marcus had a great 2-man race yesterday, got to 8th place.
Yeah.
So I think he can do really well in his 4-man too.
Big,
5:27.
Big result for him. Decent start from the boys as well. Christian Huber at 4, the man on the brakes, didn't look entirely settled. He's wriggled himself in.
Just a little bit too early in curve 5. Pushed him away a little bit. And then again tapping before going into curve 7.
Now, if he can produce another top 10 finish here, that would be a really fine start to the season.
A little bit instability in the straightaway up to Kreisel, but controls it again. And brings it nicely through the labyrinths.
Makes 11 and 12 look like it's no problem at all.
Well, if you get the steerings on the right time, it's no problem at all.
This is a top 3 run behind Johannes Lochner, but he could be ahead of Yun Jong-won. No, just behind him by 0.02 of a second. That is a good run from Markus Treichel.
9.7 the time, in 4th place at the moment.
A little bit got away from him in curve 15 and 16. Got laid into there and really shot through the roof.
And when you're carrying a lot of speed, when you have to really haul on the runners, it takes a lot of friction to change where the sled wants to go to where you want it to go.
especially these four-man sleds. If they decide to go somewhere, it's not that easy to change the direction of the sled.
Arguing with the four-man. Look at that. You see the bump there. It looks insignificant, but it lifts the entire sled off the ice. That's a lot of weight.
Skids going into curve 15.
That's 400 kilo of man in there alone. You try lifting them up when it's empty, never mind heavy. So Markus Treichel, 4th place. Next up, Maxim Anginov. Big race for the Russian yesterday in the two-man, finished in the top 6. He was 6th and 5th in the 2 4-man races in Winterberg as well. So again, Maxim is having a big start to the season.
He has been producing some really good runs. Doesn't have the fastest start times, but really makes up for it in his drives.
Alexei Zaitsev on the back of his sled. He was in the other Russian sled in the two-man race. Vasily Kondratenko, Ruslan Sametov, quite experienced pushers.
A little bit late going into curve 3, and that's why you hit the wall before going into curve 4. A little early going into 5, and taps on the wall between 5 and 6 as well. But gets it back under control now in the labyrinth 8-9 section.
3rd fastest at the start, still 3rd fastest on the split times. Good run going here for Maxim Anginov.
Great control in Kreisel, but taps and skids a little bit going into 11.
1:18.4, 2nd fastest to Yun Jung Won at that stage.
And goes into 15 perfectly, controls it in 16.
Anginov really starting to work well. 54.84, 3rd fastest. Now, we've still got our top 2 Germans to come. We've got Justin Kripps to come. But if that's not a top 6 run, then somebody is springing a surprise on us this morning, I think. Interesting, now that Kazyanov is no longer part of the World Cup campaign for the Russians, you can see suddenly that Anginov, with a bit more start, actually has got the potential to handle it.
Yeah, he really has been the top Russian driver in this season. A little bit of a skid in curve 8, just a little bit too hard of a steer.
So Alexei Zaitsev walking past with the backside ripped out of his race suit. That happens when spikes come down beside you. Usually it rips the backside out of the driver and the brakeman as well. Dominik Dvořák now from the Czech Republic, 7th and 8th in the 2 races in Winterberg. That's a big start to the season for the Czech.
A lot of Czech fans that came out today, a lot of flags. We're going to hear a lot of noise at the start.
Well, we're less than 10 kilometres from the Czech Republic border here. We're about as close to Prague as we are to Dresden. 5:24, that's a decent start.
Had to hold it off one very hard, but avoids tapping or skidding.
So 800s behind from the start. Let's see what the gap opens up to with that early error.
Very flat line in curve 4. A lot of driving going on there. And nice control in 5 and 6.
Well, 3rd fastest start, and as we saw from the Russians, still in the top 3 on the splits as he gets to the Kreisel.
Nice looking Kreisel, brings it out perfectly in the middle, going early to curve 11. This is a good looking run.
Really good looking run from Dominik Dvořák.
Just until that point where he skidded going into 15.
Just till that point where you said this is a good looking run. 3rd of the line. I'm not sure they'll be wildly disappointed with that so far.
That's a lot better than his 2-man result yesterday, so I think he'll be happy with that.
Yeah, a little disappointed, I think, with 13th in the 2-man. I think we're expecting more from him this year, and I'm sure he is. But with Dominik Sushi, a relative new boy, Jan Sindelar, and Jakub Nosek, 3rd fastest at the moment.
Really had to steer it hard off the exit of 9, but then brings it perfectly to the early entrance into Kreisel. A little bit too much pressure in the sled going out of curve 14, and that's why he breaks into a skid.
See lots of Czech flags and scarves in the crowd down at the bottom. Now then, Benny Meyer will be next up for Austria. Oscar's keeperman is Hannesi Lochner and Dominik Dvořák, the top 3. Last 3 sleds down have all gone 3rd fastest. So can Benny Meyer do the same? Well, the chances are no, because he's nursing a badly torn hamstring. So for Kilian Walch yesterday in the 2-man, he was doing all the heavy lifting. Joined here by Marcus Sammer and new boy Adrian Platzgummer So there'll be at least 3 of them humping the sled along, but Benny puts in the push handle. Goes through the same routine to get the guys fired up at the start, and then settles down into his cozy armchair.
It is a strange feeling as pilot if you have to sit into the sled. It doesn't get you into the same flow, so you really have to get into the right focus getting into your sled.
It's funny, isn't it? You've got to be an animal while you're pushing and then completely zen calm the moment you sit down, but he hasn't got that surge of adrenaline that really gets the nerves jangling.
Exactly. 5:49 is not a bad start with just 3 guys pushing. A little bit too early onto 5, pushed him away just a tad.
Well, the 2 3-man crews, Cody Bascue's 5:46, Benny Myers 5:49. Pretty respectable starts in both sides.
Good-looking line going into Kreisel and letting it wave. Going early into 11, controlling it through 11 and 12.
7th on the split times, ahead of Cody Bascue and 4-man healthy push, Roman Heinrich. Great looking run from Benny Meyer. He might not be able to walk properly, but he can drive still, can't he? 5th at the line, 54.89.
Really found the good lines on the down part of the track and just carried the speed.
Nothing at all wrong with that from Benny Meyer. 6th and 5th in the 2 races in Winterberg. If he can post a top 10 result here, sitting in, that would be a huge effort.
Sliding off and just hitting the bumper, going into curve 5, and a little bit of airborne action of the back runner. And then he comes out of curve 9. Works hard, you can see the runners, and then just touching the wall and going early to Kreisel. But considering he was starting 3,300 slower than Kibbermanis and only finishes 4,900 back, that's a great drive from Benny.
Nico Walter of Germany, our 11th starter. We're halfway through the field. Winner and bronze medalist in Winterberg, the opening 2 races of the season. The 4-man Olympic silver medalist with Pavel Kaminski, Alexander Rödinger and Eric Franke on the sled.
5:17.
Really solid start by the guys. This is his home track, same as Francesco Friedrich. And after finishing 4th in a 2-man yesterday, Nico really wants to get back in the medals.
Very good control in the upper portion of the track. And a high free line in curve 9, shooting it out, going into Kreisel.
The FES sled is 0.05 of a second behind our race leader, Oskars Kībermanis of Latvia.
Just a little touch before going into curve 11 and flopping out of curve 12. And a lot of pressure going out of curve 14.
Big mistake there that Kībermanis did not make. Let's see what the gap is at the line. Was 700s, a 10th and more, 1500s, 54.55. So Kībermanis still leads with 2 German sleds behind him.
He had an impressive run. And Nico's run was good, but just a little bit of a mistake in the bottom part of the track.
So Nico Walter 1500s off the lead, Hansi Lochner 2500s off the lead, set by Oskars Kībermanis. Germany with 1 ace still to play.
And here you can see him coming out of curve 14 with too much pressure, hitting the wall and breaking into a skid. And he's trying hard to correct it with the runners, but if there's so much pressure in a heavy sled, there's nothing you can do.
Nico, you can see, is disappointed with that. Little smile for the cameras, but the frown on his face. Next up is our Russian rookie this season, Alexander Bradikin, the 23-year-old. Began his campaign in the double 2-man race in Sigulda. He was 8th and 7th in Winterberg. Just a couple of spots in each race behind teammate Maxim Andrianov.
And just like Andrianov, he's been doing it with great driving lines down the track. 5:25.
Good solid start.
Just as fast as his teammate earlier on.
Well, Andrianov currently lying in 5th position.
Tiny tap going into curve 4, but that's a bigger tap going into curve 5. Really pushed him away there. And it gets it back under control now in the 7-8 portion of the track. You can see a lot of work going on, not to break into the skid in the straightaway. And a lot of steering going on in the Kreisel lower line. A lot of pressure, tapping before going into 11.
Still in 5th place on the splits, ahead of teammate Anjanov.
Hold it off 13 and almost rolled into curve 14.
All the errors are catching up with him, down to 8th place. This might be top 10 at the line. Where is he? 9th position, 55.04. Well, you can make a few mistakes in the four-man and get away with it, but if you keep adding those problems, then it all catches up with you in the end. Alexander Bradikian, nevertheless, first time here in the World Cup. He's only in his 3rd or 4th season of driving, so if he can produce a top 10 result here again, that would be a big result for him. Was 12th in yesterday's two-man race.
Coming out of curve 4 with too much height and then hitting the wall before going into 5, and a lot of airborne action there. And then we see him coming out of curve 9. Just brings the runners back to neutral a little bit too soon and skids there.
12 sleds down, Latvia's Oskar Kībermanis leads. Here is our Olympic and world champion in four-man bobsleigh, the two-man winner yesterday, his 3rd straight two-man win of the season. He's won one of the 2 four-man races as well. He is our points leader in both categories. He's also the local boy from nearby Piana, Francesco Friedrich, with Candy Bauer, Martin Grotkopp and Torsten Margis. Of those 3, only Candy Bauer has not also had a two-man win behind the driver.
Fastest time so far was 5:15 at the start, but these guys are looking to improve on that. 5:13. Really clean line coming out of curve 1. And going perfectly on the left side into curve 3.
Friedrich is just getting better and better, isn't he? In his stats, it takes the entire run just to run down what he's won.
Wasn't perfect coming out of curve 4, but he's allowing the free line.
Well, yesterday, he wasn't the first heat leader. That was Justin Cripps. He was 400s back, but his second run, he said, was near perfect, and he just crushed the opposition. In fact, Torsten Margis told me after the race, he said, I have never been down more smoothly on this track in my life. And he's had a few trips here as well. And that is another top draw effort from Francesco Friedrich, 54.15. He's got a crash to give this one away. They're not going to catch him. They're not going to make up half a second on him in the second heat.
That's a great looking run, but it wasn't perfect yet. Little mistake out of curve 4, little mistake coming out of curve 14. So I think he's looking to improve on that on his second run. Looking for that nearly perfect run as well. And you can see just a little bit of pressure coming out of 14. A tiny skid.
He was saying by the end of the run yesterday, he had some quite decent ice. The first run, very slushy, but it had hardened up. It stopped raining about halfway through the second heat. And that's what allowed him to really get the best out of it. Germany, Latvia, Germany, Germany, your top 4. Latvia's Ralfs Bērčins, his first four-man race here in Altenberg in Germany. 10th in yesterday's two-man encounter. He was 11th and 13th in Winterberg. This is his rookie season in the World Cup.
Always a lot of Latvian fans on every track in the world.
Yeah.
It's a big sport over there.
1.9 million people in Latvia itself. Seem to be that many coming to the tracks all across the world as well. 5.30.
And clean coming out of curve 1 and controlling it a little bit long around curve 2. Hits before going into Omega curve. And just slides off but avoids the wall going into curve 5. A little bit of a touch on the wall before going to 7. And a big skid on the straightaway. Hits the wall before going into 11 and a little bit of a skid, but controls it nicely. But skids going late into curve 13. That's a lot of pressure for the guys.
Well, he was closing in on a top 7 finish, and then those mistakes lower down have dropped him down the order. 11th at the line. He finished 10th in the two-man yesterday. I think Coach Sanders Prusis will be pretty happy with top 10, top 12 finish. Young man still in the very early stages of his World Cup career, and only in his 4th season of sliding.
And doesn't have so much foreman experience yet.
Again, same thing as we said with Roman Heinrich. You start in two-man, and then you take up four-man.
Hits the wall, and just a little bit of a skid there going into curve 11, but controls it nicely into 12, and really points the nose going early to curve 13, not to have the late entrance and shooting up there. Skidding and hitting the wall uphill going into 15.
Francesco Friedrich, the race leader, by a quarter of a second from Oskars Kiebermanis. Nico Walter, 4/10 back in third. 15th of our 20 sleds, the first heat of the four-man race in Altenberg, is Ivo de Bruin, who finished a great 7th in the two-man race yesterday, his best result by some margin, with Duckface Duma at 2, Dennis Fenke and Janko Francic behind him.
Ivo only has 2 foreman runs on this track ever. He had the first foreman trips this week, so he did great in the two-man and wants to... Oh, a little bit of a skid going out of curve 1. He wants to repeat that today in the foreman.
Well, any result at all will be his personal best here, as you said. Never raced here at any level before.
A little bit of a slide going out of curve 4 and taps the wall before going into 7. With a nice hooking straightaway, not perfect, just a tap, but straightens it out.
11th place on the splits. He's ahead of Roman Heinrich and Ralf Bertzins.
Had to work really hard in curve 12 to control the height. And brings it down too early with a little bit too much pressure and skidding going uphill.
That's going to rob him of a couple of places. He was looking at a top 12 at the line. It's 14th, 55-47. But like you say, more runs in the two-man to learn the track, and then a couple in the four-man to qualify for the race. You've got to complete 2 runs to make sure you're in. So that's his 3rd run in a four-man. All things considered, not bad looking. So he's ahead of Justin Olsen, who is similarly inexperienced on this track, or not quite so much, but...
Comes out too early and has a lot of pressure, making him tap on the left side and then breaking into a skid and tapping on the other side. Good control going into curve 16.
Once you get them out of shape, they stay out of shape a long way, don't they, the four-man? All of that weight is swinging around behind the axle in front of the driver's feet.
And you can see he was not very pleased with that run.
Justin Cribbs of Canada, first-round leader yesterday in his first World Cup race since winning Olympic gold in the two-man. And this is his first four-man race of the World Cup season. The Canadians raced in the Europa Cup here in December. He won here in the four-man. His record here, 7th, 10th, 14th, and last year 4th. Justin Cribbs celebrates his 32nd birthday today. Cam Stones, the man at 3, was 27 yesterday. Cribbs gave him a silver medal as a birthday present. Let's see what they can dig out today.
Oh, slips, jumping into the sled. He barely got in, but controls it through curve 1. Playing with the runners, not to break into the skid. Nice and free line in curve 4, just sliding a little bit off. And a little bit early onto curve 7, but controls it. And a high line in curve 9. And a big skid. He tries to control, oh, that's a big wave. But got it back under control in the 3rd wave of Kreisel. And a little bit of a skid there going out of curve 12. Ooh.
Huge height for Cribbs, and...
But he saves it.
Wow.
You could see the mistake going out of curve 12 and then shoot him up in 13, and then it's really hard. Then you hit on the left side going into curve 14 and just shooting up.
And that moment there, as they started to go weightless in the sled, I think the brakemen feared the worst there, probably. This track does have a tough reputation, doesn't it? A place where crashes happen. And Cribbs got about as close as you want to get there.
That's definitely not what he wanted to do here.
No, 5:20 getaway for Cribbs, 5th fastest.
You can see him coming out of curve 9, skids, taps the wall and breaks into a skid again. And then you can see him here working hard, tapping the wall and shooting up in curve 14, and then you dive out, and there's still a lot of curve left, so there's a second pressure coming on, and he barely saved it.
Lamb.
Great reaction.
Yeah, no kidding. Hauled it off. So not the run he wanted, but plenty of room for improvement for Justin Cripps. See the Canadian girls down there helping with the sleds. Next up is Brad Hall of Great Britain, with 26-year-old Alan Toward behind him. Nick Gleeson, the 22-year-old from the Parachute Regiment, and 32-year-old Ben Simons are the crew. 15th in yesterday's two-man. He was 16th and 17th in the four-man races in Winterberg. They had the second fastest start in the two-man competition yesterday. 5:24, not quite there in a long, late load.
Took a lot of time for the guys to get in, but no problems in curve 1 and 2.
Brad sitting up very high in this sled. He's not the tallest of drivers.
A little bit of a hit going into 4 and coming out of 4.
Well, this sled built locally. It's one of the last built by the Dresden Aircraft and Sled Factory at Dresden Airport, with a more up-to-date Singer cowl on it.
A little unstable, but no major skids in the straightaway. Controlling the Kreisel. A little bit high in curve 12 and skidding, but controlling it again in 13 and 14.
9400s back, 13th position at the moment for Brad Hall of Great Britain. And at the line, ahead or behind, he's just ahead of Roman Heinrich, so 12th position.
4 and 12th place at the moment.
If he can clean up the mistakes at the top of the track in curve 3 and 4, he might improve on that in the second run.
We saw Alan Toward stand up first, the man at 2 from Middlesbrough, former GB discus thrower. And there's Brad Hall. It's a little rocky at the top.
Coming out of 4 and hitting the wall, going into 5, and you can see the back of the sled lifting up and the brakeman being thrown out of his seat.
Yeah. I don't think Ben Simons is the easiest man to lift up, so you can see the energy. If it's throwing them up in the air, then it's not pushing the sled forward. 18th of 20 sleds, Nick Polignato, the 31-year-old, finished in 20th place here last year. Rookie crew, debutant William O'Clair, Dexter Janke, and Kiefer Joyce, all very new to the sport.
5:32. A little bit of a skid going out of curve 1.
All three brakemen with Polignato making their World Cup debut here on perhaps the most intimidating of all tracks.
Nice control around the Omega curve.
William O'Clair at 2, 6 races in his career. Dexter Janke, 5 races in his career.
Tapping the wall on the left side, but still going early into Kreisel. Ooh, and he's going late into 11, so a lot of steering going on to control it there, and late into 13. That's a lot of steering going on.
Well, he hasn't scared them as badly as Justin Cripps scared his crew, I don't think, yet, but it's been a bit of a bumpy ride. 55.48. And Richardson, the coach there, off a 5:32 start. Well, gentlemen, welcome to the World Cup. I think it probably gets a little smoother next weekend in Koenigsegg, at least if your driver gets the exit of the Kreisel right, it does. So William O'Clair, Dexter Janke, or Janke, as he will undoubtedly be known at all the German tracks, and Kiefer Joyce, the new boys in the World Cup.
Coming out of curve 9 and just breaking into a skid. He tries to correct it and then goes to the left side. And then high in 11, a lot of steering going on there, but controls it at curve 12. But then goes late into curve 13, and then you have to do a lot of steering not to let it ping up.
Polignato only 100th behind Ivo de Bruyn, a couple of hundreds in front of Justin Cripps. As we get to our next World Cup rookie, this is Ivan Linuchev, who made his two-man debut yesterday, makes his four-man debut today, with Denis Korotkov, who made his World Cup debut yesterday. New boy Vladislav I knew I'd get that right. Zharovtsev at 3 and Sergei Susuov at 4, both making their first ever World Cup starts. So lots of new muscle being brought into the Russian program.
pilot got into the sled really early before the crest. Oh, and slides off curve 1, just a little bit sideways. The guys sitting pretty high in their sliding position. You can see a lot of the helmets. Taps before going into 5. The controls it again in curve 6 and 7.
Traditionally, the
Too much
brakemen...
pressure there.
Traditionally, brakemen sit with their legs around the man in front, whether it's the driver or the other brakeman. Occasionally, though, the man at 2 has to ride cannonball with his knees up under his chin and his legs, his feet basically by his backside. It looks as though that might be the case here.
Big skid and late going into curve 15. Not the cleanest looking run.
All right, 13th, 55.34. That's not a bad result for his 4-man World Cup debut so far, ahead of Roman Heinrich, Cody Bascue, Ivo de Bruyn, Nick Polignato, Justin Cripps, and Justin Olsen. And with, as you say, a lot to tidy up, particularly from the moment he sits down. So if you're not going to run quite as fast as the others, or as far as the others, you need to not make mistakes when you get into the sled. And Ivan did.
Comes out with a lot of pressure there in curve 9. A little bit too early down, and then the pressure cuts you again and hits the wall and breaks into a big skid going into Kreisel.
Not at all dissimilar to Justin Cripps' mistake, that one.
And that's coming out of 14, hitting and breaking to a big skid again.
Yeah, when you're hitting both sides of the track at the same time with the sled, you know you've got it sideways. Final sled in the first of our 2 heats then, and a first race in the World Cup this season for Maciej Lucia, Poland, Jakub Zarewski, Arnold Spediak, and rookie Paweł Sarnecki on the back, making his World Cup debut. The other 2 brakemen with a total of 8 4-man races between them.
Not the most experienced crew, but a 5:35 nonetheless.
Now Luti with a bit more driving experience than Ivan Linyuchev, who we just saw from Russia.
Clean lines at the top of the track.
Finished 11th in a 2-man race yesterday, the Polish sled.
Good control, but high in curve 9 and dives it out and breaks into the skid.
Well, he'd driven himself from a 16th start up into 14th by that stage. I think he's going to sink back, yeah, back down to 16th.
Yeah, a little bit high at the end of Kreisel. And then a lot of work going on in 11-12. Hits the wall, skids again. It is a very tricky part, that uphill section after 14.
Across the line in 18th with a 55.53. Everybody safely down to complete the first heat. He's ahead of Justin Cripps and just behind Nick Polignato. 100th ahead of Cripps, 500th behind Polignato, the 2 Canadians. So 3 sleds that are having their first World Cup race of the season, down towards the tail of the field. So that's our top 20 completed. They will all go in reverse order in the second heat. And for a lot of them, work to do.
Dived out of curve 9 a little bit too early, and then there was still some pressure left in his sled. And here in 14, he doesn't work hard enough and then hits the wall and breaks into the skid. Not happy with that.
Watching the replay, he knows all the mistakes and a few more that we didn't have time to show. At the top of the tree, though, despite having a not quite perfect run, Francesco Friedrich, yesterday's winner, and already a gold and silver medalist in the World Cup in 4-man this season from Winterberg, leads by a clear 1/4 of a second. The gap back to Oscar Kibermanis. Kibermanis in second for Latvia. Nico Valter, the other local boy here, in 3rd place. Valter 4/10 off gold, and his closest rival, Hansi Lochner, is a further 10th behind. Then Dominik Dvorak, great run into 5th. Maxim Anjanov likewise in 6th. Benny Meyer sitting in a 3-man push. He's in 7th ahead of the Olympic silver medalist Yun Jung-won in 8th. Rounding out the top 10, Markus Treichel, 2 Austrian sleds in the 10, and Alexander Bredikin making it 2 Russian sleds in the top 10 as well, as the Justins, Cripps and Olsen, bring up the tail of the field. So they'll go in reverse order in the second heat. They'll go 20 down to 1 as we wait to see Francesco Friedrich win the four-man race here in Altenberg. Chances are that's going to happen, but join Anne van Nieuwenhuis, me, Martin Haven, and the IBSF TV crew to see how it all transpires behind him when we come back on ice at 2 o'clock at 1300 local, 1200 GMT. We'll see you then. Bye for now.